your name. I hope my team that won, yeah. 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 I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see my team run along. It's a long, fine as a mom. But it's a war, it's hard. I'ma do the job, yeah. That's the real. You know what we talking about. Talking about talk. They know what we talking about. Talking about the analytic data. We can hear how if you know them like I know them. They can play you with your team if they want to love. Yeah, on the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, yes sir, pay attention, and he gon' teach the lesson, yes, and you gon' learn to play, you gon' learn to play, how they teach they play the play, how they play, boy, you gon' learn to play, how they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that swag, that New York, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay, tune into the HBCU Sports Lab, we got the deal, Mike and Charles, nothing time.
This is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab, and you just heard us giving it to you. I told you we're going to bring it as you see it, getting it going. It's going to be no difference, but COVID-19 has it doing a little different today. This is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Both of them are here live, not anybody on assignment. Can you believe it? Yes. As we have it, welcome and thanks for joining us inside our studio lecture hall, the HBCU Sports Lab, for the only weekly sports talk radio show that is dedicated to exploring the sporting HBCU diaspora, including the marching sports with its unique HBCU culture identity, the teams, the bands, coaches, athletic directors, commissioners, provosts, presidents, big rivalry matchup, classic games, homecoming events, and much, much more from the HBCU athletic aesthetics. As we emerge our lecture with the sports business practices in the competitive sports industry, the show seeks to provide innovative, progressive, informative dialogue about the week's HBCU sporting events, issues, and ideas from a fan's perspective. We review the Southwestern Athletic Conference, better known as the SWAC, the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, better known as the MEAC of the NCAA Division I, Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, SIAC, Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association of the CIAA of the NCAA Division II, Gulf Coast Athletic Conference, GCAC of the NAIA, and independent programs such as Tennessee State of the OVC, Hampton of the Big South, man, I almost said North Carolina A&T, I guess they ain't made that move yet, Langston of the Sooner Athletic Conference, and Texas College, affiliated member of the conference in terms of football. And you also have Edward Waters as they transition from NAIA to NCAA Division II and membership in the SIAC. I am Kenyatta Cavil, a.k.a. the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports. What you say, Charles? First, Charles, let me give you a little description how you look, because I know Mike might be in his pajamas. I know how he does it.
Definitely no sports jacket on today. So.
You gotta watch him. I'm telling you, Mike will do it differently on you if you're not careful. So I'm sitting up here with a T-shirt. Hey, Mike, you can laugh a little bit. I know I'll call you out there.
Yeah, I hear you. Don't worry. The meter's racking up, baby. You know.
Don't say that. Support black journalists. Radio journalists in this case. That's what I got on T-shirt. And, you know, Charles hooked me up on this and told me, man, check this out. I had to get me two of them. One is black and one is, if you would, a gray one. I have the shirt on with my jacket, so looking a little dapper there a little bit, making sure everybody recognizes what's going on, if you would. But Charles, if you would tell us, what is the news of the day?
Yeah, let's jump right into it, Dr. Cavil, and this comes to us courtesy of Alcorn State Athletics, as they have made a decision that they're going to take the men's and women's basketball programs in different directions after announcing the contracts of Montez Robinson and Courtney Pruitt will not be renewed. And this is a statement from Director of Athletics, Derek Horn. We fully recognize and appreciate the commitment they made to Alcorn. These were very difficult decisions, especially considering how they were both great mentors to their student athletes. I thank them for their services and wish them the best in their future endeavor. So that was athletic director Derek Warren. He goes on to say we have very high expectations for our basketball programs, and we'll begin a national search immediately to identify their successors.
Wow, I think that was a shock to a lot of people. I don't know about the timing of that, but it's certainly interesting. I know both of them had 5-year deals, and essentially their contracts came to the end, so they just didn't extend them. So they were let go. So it's not like what you think about. You have a contract and you're fired and you have years left. But with that said, I guess on the women's side, you certainly can see where they struggle quite a bit. For example, if you look at this last year, women were not top 4. And, in the SWAC, top 4 is really big. Top 4, you get to host a game. And essentially, I think there's only been one team, and that was a 4 against a 5, where Prairie View lost as the 4th seed, where they didn't make it to Birmingham. So since they started going to the top 8 teams and the 4 teams host quarterfinal games at home, you've only had one team not make it to Birmingham. So it's big if you can at least, it seems, get in the top 4. They haven't done that during the women's shop, if you would, in regards to everything moving forward with on the women's side. But on the men's side, winning record 3 of the last 5 years. First, second year that came in, really pushed the conference in a lot of ways. Looked like they were in a position to get a championship, didn't get it done. Tells you a little bit of how close it could be. So with that, Mike, what are your thoughts on this men's, women's side, irrespectively? You can talk about either or both. What are your thoughts about this move for Alcorn State, especially during this time right now?
Well, my thoughts actually go to more so the men because, at any one time over the last 3 or 4 weeks, they were vying for that 4th, 5th slot in the SWAC. So they were competitive, and they have been competitive in the tournament. I'm not going to say that and go as far as say, they would have won, but anything can happen in a tournament where you have a lot of rivalries. But they were fairly competitive. They were in the top 5 in the SWAC. So I also question the timing of this move. If you look at the landscape and all that's going on, I question the timing of such a sweeping move. You wonder what brought it about. Was it a lot of the pressure from the alumni? Was it pressure from above in the administration? What was the driver? What was the catalyst for making such a sweeping change at this point in time? I don't know, and I'm still scratching my head on.
Great points, Mike. Charles, I know you broke down the news, but what are your thoughts on this move in regards to the time? And much like what Mike said, how do your thoughts spin on this?
Like I said, the time is weird, but you got to understand something about this Alcorn State program. This is a proud, tradition-rich program, both on the men's and women's side. A program of Baby Whit. This is the program of Shirley Walker on the women's side. So I'm sure alumni of Alcorn were not particularly happy with what they were looking at in terms of what they're watching on the basketball court. Montez Robinson, 69-86 during his 5 years. So you're talking about a program that has always been had a strong tradition in basketball and as far as basketball and women's side. So in a way, I understand, but undoubtedly the timing is a suspect at best.
Yeah, I think you make some excellent points when you're talking about the rich tradition of Alcorn, both on the men's and women's side. The men's program history goes way back, but in a lot of ways it's tied with the women's side when you talk about the 2 Coach Walkers and what they were able to do. One as the head coach, the other as assistant coach. Rest in peace to Coach Walker, as we talked about just recently. So you move on some excellent point when you're talking about the fans not being happy. One thing that I'm always interested and would like to talk about this a little more and maybe get your viewpoints on this is I think the fans certainly have every right to talk about their concern about a basketball program when it dips, but things change over a period of time. And I'm always interested in in terms of financing, what does it look like in terms of the actual commitment? Obviously, in this case, we're talking about Alcorn State, so let's juxtapose this against what they're able to, the success they're able to have in football. I mean, literally have dominated the conference over the last couple of years, particularly that division. Basketball's not played in divisions, but you can look at it in that perspective. And from that is the commitment there from Alcorn in regards to not just their expectation, but in regards to what they're putting on the table for the men's and women's basketball program to be successful. We've seen this in a different way. Texas Southern is seen to consistently make a commitment. They're similar in terms of the history. You can talk about Texas Southern's, particularly on the men's side in terms of basketball. But over the years, when Charles took over VP of Intercollegiate Athletics, and now under Granger, also the VP of Intercollegiate Athletics, you've seen the financial commitment that Texas Southern has made to basketball. In a lot of ways, how they pushed the rest of the conference. And their rival, oddly enough, in Prairie View made a change, so we can talk about that. But we also know the commitment, the financial level that Prairie View has made to basketball, both on the men's and women's side, and we see what it did to women's basketball last year. They were right there pushing on the edge of a championship regular season, got to the tournament, got to the semifinals. On the men's side, you're talking about historic heights that they've done, winning back-to-back season regular champions, winning both the postseason last year, making it to the Big Tens, and obviously we know with COVID-19 that was not the case. And some people may have questioned would they have done it again with many teams in the conference playing so well. But we see the commitment that Prairie View has made, at least financially. I think there's some other commitments that people are questioning. But have you heard anything in regards to the finance side of what Alcorn is doing for their women's and basketball program? Are they going to make the financial commitment as they look for a new coach on both sides to counter the argument that they need to win and be successful because of the historic relevance people see in the Alcorn State program? Let me start with you, Mike, in regards to that loaded question.
So you asked about commitment. You asked about financial commitment, but I also talk about longevity and commitment. The two go hand in hand. You can't bring a one-level coach and expect them to turn a program around, to build a successful platform from a program in 2 years. There's an established formula, there's an established paradigm for which it takes a number of years, but that requires the ongoing commitment of the administration and the alumni over the course of 3 or 4 years. So then I ask the question, what is the commitment of Alcorn State to either of these coaches over the long term? And I wonder if you look at successful models, and if we look at those that have been there for 2-3 years, enough of them to get the recruiting classes, to get grades established, to get the APRs established, I wonder if there's enough of that formula where you have financial commitment, longevity, administrative support for those coaches. And I kind of see that lacking in a lot of the schools that we're talking about.
Great point. Charles, follow up with that in terms of more of the financial commitment. Are you hearing anything or see any evidence that the Braves program is going to make a financial commitment, or do they believe that they are currently making a financial commitment?
I think that's the million-dollar question. Are they making a financial commitment? And I'll be honest with you, I think the rank and file fans, they're not thinking in those terms of our financial commitment to the program. They think in terms of wins and losses. And at the end of the day, when they get ready to file off that email to that AD on Monday morning after they watch, whatever happened over the weekend, all we're thinking about is the wins and losses. And there once was a time when, Coach Whitney was blah, blah, blah. And that's what I get, I think, a lot from a lot of older alumni is you talk about your financial commitment, and they will tell you in a heartbeat, listen, Coach Whitney won with a lot less in terms of financial commitment. Coach Walker won with a lot less in terms of financial commitment. It was a different day and I think you guys hit the nail on the head in terms of it is a different day and age, but your rank and file fan does not think in those terms. So, when they file off the angry email, Tuesday morning after they watch the last on Saturday or last on Monday, again, that's all they think about, wins and losses.
I love the way you think, Charles, in regards to digging in and really giving us some insight in terms of the pedigree of the program and from a fan's perspective. Let's dig into that a little bit more. In regards to the fan perspective, if you would be, how active do you believe the fans are in regards to the decisions that the AD makes? And so I asked that question from this perspective because how much of this do you believe was driven by the fans versus this being a decision that the athletic director made because they reviewed the data and they weren't living up to their own expectations?
I think fans, at the end of the day, will be fans. You take a look at Alcorn's this program this past year, you don't want to lose 3 to your arch rival in Jackson State. They have to go to the office and keep that all season. You don't want Jackson State claiming some state division title. That does bother me. So I think at the end of the day, fan fervor, I think, drives a lot of decisions that our athletic directors make in terms of what they're looking at on the field, or looking at on the court, or looking at on the baseball diamond. At the end of the day, it's fan fervor that really drives ticket sales and things of that nature. So I think, when you take all of those factors into account, they're looking at the wins and losses, and they're, kind of shrugging on the AD shoulder like, hey, what's up with these programs? I know we're great at football, but guess what? Do you know how great a basketball program we once were? What is going on? So I think you get a lot of that effort.
I think you lack a lot of organizational patience, especially with that type of thing. You have fans, as you mentioned, Charles, tweeting, texting, whatever, posting on Facebook on Monday or Tuesday morning, and then the organization or the administration making a knee-jerk reaction. And that's what I go back to, patience. There has to be a span of time in addition to the financial commitment.
Now, you're talking about the analysts on the show in regards to that. So with Mike's business perspective, it's always intriguing because I figured that he would go that way, which begs a different question where we need to dig even deeper when we have this. Is it the responsibility of the athletic director or VP of Intercollegiate Athletics, as a lot of them like to call now, and the president to educate the fan base? And when I use the word educate the fan base, is to talk about the budgets, if you would, in regards to how they come up with their revenue, and what does that mean in terms of their competitiveness within the conference, for one thing, and outside of the conference. When you do that, is that something that should be done more often in regards to creating that conversation back and forth, so you make sure that you have not only a passionate fan base but an educated fan base? I'm gonna start back with you, Mike, because you kind of pushed me in that direction. What are your thoughts on that, and then I'll see what Charles thinks.
I don't know if I'd say it's a responsibility, but it's an obligation that they own now with the changing landscape of sports. If you look at how decisions are made, and if you look at the fan base, and Charles really did a good point of hammering home, we have those hardcore fan bases, and Alcorn State's not the only one. Those hardcore fan bases that want change, they want immediate results. I think there is no other that's better suited or has the obligatory responsibility to educate the fan base on a lot of decisions. And I think that Charles McClellan is a good example of how he is able to go in and not only make decisions, but educate. Here's why we made that decision. Here's the rationale behind it. And not all fans, but a lot of fans will go, okay, we understand now, Charles, what's the rationale. And I think, to me, that's a perfect example of what a VP of athletics, what their responsibility is, whether they want to embrace it, whether they want it or not. Nowadays, it's different than it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Nowadays, that is now a responsibility of the person who holds that title.
Thank you. Charles, your thoughts on that?
I should have said it, but a perfect example, and I use this word, transparency gets you everywhere with the fan base. I really, truly believe that. I think one of the great things that I've always watched about McClellan from the commissioner's seat is he's very transparent in terms of, how we're, going about making the widgets, if you will, and how we go about that process. I think that just goes a long way in terms of helping your fan base. If you educate your fan base in terms of how you're going about, trying to bring in revenue and this, that, and the other, and why the team isn't doing or is doing what it's doing, it just goes such a long way. And I really don't understand why some athletic administrations don't heed the transparency model, because that gets you everywhere with a fan base. An educated fan base is your best fan base, and once they understand, you can do what you need to do from that standpoint going forward.
All right, with that, Charles, let me go back to Mike. Do you have any final closing points on that? I think Charles makes some excellent points. I like the way that he broke out and talking about, an educated fan base is the best fan base. I like that.
Absolutely. I think that summarizes the best. So.
Certainly. With that, let's look at, I know that people got caught up that the basketball conference championships were not held this year. And so we were given our week-to-week HBCU reports. Well, guess what? The final report is here. Games have been played. So I want to see what your thoughts are on the final poll. Usually we start with the women, and I guess we could still do that. But let me get your thoughts before we get into the women's side in regards to that. Let's go with the men's for a minute here. And I want to see what your thoughts in terms of this top 5 poll final ranking, and see if you have any concerns. What's going on here? Let me go first with those teams that received votes. Receiving votes on the men's side were Bethune-Cookman Wildcats, finished the season with a winning record 16-14, 10-16, so they end up with 15 points outside of the top 5. Also receiving votes, team that really started off strong and were at the top of the poll for much of the year, and then kind of slid near the end. Big games that they lost back-to-back when they traveled to the Carolinas, and they just couldn't quite get back over the hump. With that, Norfolk State Spartans sit at 16, 15, 12, and 4, 22 points outside of the top 25. Tennessee State Tigers were 18 and 15, 9-9, one of their best seasons in a while, most wins at home. But because of the 9-9 conference mark and going 1-1 in the tournament, so they kind of had that ebb and flow, they end outside of the top 5 with 43 points. The change for the final poll did see Norfolk State actually dropping out of the top 5. As I said earlier, they were in the top 5. And who jumps in their place in the final poll? Texas Southern Tigers sit at 16 and 16, 12 and 6. 61 points were not ranked before this final poll. The week before that was. And at number 4, you have Southern Jaguars that really finished the season strong at 17 and 15, 13 and 5, 66 points. They were previously ranked 5, so they close out this final poll ranking in week number 11, if you would, jumping up 1 spot. At number 3, you have North Carolina A&T, the State Aggies, 17, 15, 12 and 4, 80 points, finished the season 3rd ranked in terms of the final poll ranking. At number 2, you have Prairie View A&M Panthers sitting 19 and 13, 14 and 4, 4 first place votes, 96 points. Previous ranked 2, and they remain there to finish out this final poll in week number 11, which means our number 1 team remains number 1. Is North Carolina Central Eagles, 18 and 13, 13 and 3, 5 first place votes, 101 points, 1
as they were previously ranked one. They end up number one team. North Carolina Central's earned the number one ranking in the final poll in week number 11. They got the done regular season championship similar as Prairie, but I think the way they finished the season, including getting it done against the rival North Carolina A&T, we talked about that championship. All these teams in the top part of the poll, top 5 teams, got into at least the quarterfinals of the tournament. They won their first game in terms of the quarterfinals. But after that, obviously, the terms were closed. So that will do it in terms of the poll rankings for Dr. Ville's Inside the HBCU Sports Ranking 2020. That's 2019-2020 HBCU Major Division Men's Basketball Poll Rankings for week number 11, the final week as that was last week, but giving it to you this week. Let me start with Charles. Usually I get to see your face and I get to go to whoever gives me the craziest face, but I don't have that luxury. So you were both extremely polite in terms of just listening contently. So with that, Charles Bishop does last name does start with a B. So as this is the lecture hall as we talk about, we're going to go in alphabetical order. So it's very even. People can't say I'm choosing one of y'all over the other. And so, Charles, let me know your thoughts on the top 5 teams and some of the teams outside. You agree with this poll? You don't agree with this poll? Before I do that, we do know that this is an algorithm ranking. We talk about head-to-head matchups in this ranking. It's just for this year. We talk about strength of schedules, and it might give you a little more in terms of some of these teams and how they ranked RPI. But before I do that, let me not bias you any, and let me just take you off your head and your heart. What do you think about this top 5? I'm sure you put a little analytics in there too. That's your business. But let me know your thoughts on this.
Top 5, I think it was pretty fair in terms of North Carolina Central being the number one team with their strong finishing kick, and then of course we all got a chance to watch that nationally televised game against North Carolina A&T. But you talk about a guy like Jabri Blunt. He was the player of the year. Led them throughout the course of the year. A young man who averaged, 20 points, in conference play, double figures the majority of the year in terms of scoring. But that was just a very, very tough team, and I think they were very deserving of their number one ranking. And we kind of kept saying it during the course of the year how we were expecting and somewhere around, mid-January going into February, we started to see that eagle kick, if you will, where they start coming down the stretch, and they were as tough a team as any out there. One of the things that I lament is that we just didn't get an opportunity for teams to finish that tournament play, because I think you really, with a team like Southern, I think they were the hottest team really in all of HBCU basketball in terms of them coming down the stretch, and to see how they would have matched up against Prairie View, Texas Southern, Jackson State, and we were really setting up for a really great SWAC tournament. And then I was waiting on the tournament, kind of the return of North Carolina Central, North Carolina A&T. Those teams really matched up very, very well, and it would have been interesting to see what would have happened in the MEAC tournament. So I think that's a fair call on the poll to look things up.
Certainly. Before I let Mike jump in here and see where his mind is on this poll, you said Southern hottest team. You just talked about North Carolina Central and the way they finished the season. You think Southern was a hotter team than North Carolina Central, or were you talking about more in regards to the SWAC?
No, I was talking about more in regards to the SWAC in terms of Southern. I mentioned watching Southern going down the stretch, the way they were playing defense. They would have been a very, very tough out. They were the top defensive team in the SWAC all season, and would have been fun watching what would have happened in the SWAC tournament. But I think in terms of SWAC play, I think the Southern Jaguars were the hottest team coming into the tournament.
No doubt about it. I think you make some very good points, and the check is in the mail since you agree with my poll rankings. There will be steak for you, Charles Bishop. I had a nice round steak, and just let me know how you want it cooked, and we'll make sure we'll practice good distancing, but we'll make sure you get your steak.
And make sure I get my steak on the grill, no doubt.
Since you agree with it. Hopefully I didn't bias you, Mike. But Mike, what are your thoughts on this poll?
I have a slightly different take, so you can keep your damn take. For the most part, I agree. I agree that North Carolina A&T fell out, but my top three for the majors were actually Prairie View A&M. I was going tit for tat with North Carolina Central and Southern. I do think Southern was the hottest team going into the tournament. They had an 8-game winning streak. Their margin of victory in their last 8 games was greater than what you had in North Carolina Central. Although you don't know strength of talent. So if you look at how they performed going down the stretch, I have Southern as number 3, almost as close to the North Carolina Central. Prairie View, I think, gets penalized because of their last 2 or 3. I think it was 2 losses.
Yeah.
They won the tournament early. So I don't know if there were some coaching changes to deserve. They won in their first round. I think they were penalized. So I could understand maybe the voters seeing that, okay, looking at how they're finished and looking at how others finished, maybe you put a North Carolina Central. But if you match them up pound for pound, and you look at least we don't have any other tests. Unfortunately, we couldn't let this thing play out. But if you look at them pound for pound across and look at them statistically, Prairie View is a much better team. And I think would have been able to show that much better team than North Carolina Central. Now, I would have been interested in seeing a Prairie View Southern matchup, because that was one heck of a matchup. I think they split the series during the regular season, and Southern was very impressive. So those are my top 3.
Man, bombshell. I like the way you did that, Mike. But I think you make some good points, and I'm gonna let Charles jump back in here, and as he got a little tugged at the heart when you were giving your rationale. So I want to hear his response in regards to that. But I think you make some excellent points that I wanted to bring back out a little bit in regards to the North Carolina Central team, and why this is a team that had played out well in regards to what have you done for me lately. Having the championship on the table, it was a home game. We need to think about this, but this is a team that slow walked everybody down in a lot of ways. As you said, they won critical games, and they did obviously what was enough to earn the regular season championship. But this is not necessarily an Eagle team that dominated their conference play. They actually lost a game early in the season in terms of that SWAC matchup they had, and started off really slow in the non-conference against some winnable games. And even in conference play, they had some tough losses. And when they did get the big win over Norfolk State, when Norfolk State was leading the conference and lost back-to-back, first to North Carolina A&T on that Saturday, and then to North Carolina Central on that Monday. Obviously, Central lost really big to A&T in that first matchup, but then was able to get it done. So, point well taken in regards to that this is a really well-coached team. I would argue Mouton has done his best coaching job since he's been at Central in regards to knowing what buttons to push on his team and really getting them to play well. But I do think you make some good points that things lined up really well for them in regards to the schedule, i.e. having that last game at home. So I think that's some great points you make. With that, I really want to hear what Charles says in regards to why he thinks differently.
I don't know if it's so much that I think different, because I think Prairie View is a great team in terms of a player like Devontae Patterson, who I've watched over the past couple of years, and he has just been, we joke about old man game, but he really does have old man game, and he just gets it done, both on the offensive and defensive side of the court. But, just because you're talking about it, Dr. Villette, boy, I would just have loved to see a top 3 SWAC matchup versus the top 3 in the MEAC. I mean, wouldn't it be fun to watch Prairie View, Texas Southern, and a Southern matchup against a Central or a That's a great point. Great point. That's the matchup I would love to see. That
conference play or matchup, top three against your best top three.
Oh, man.
Fun stuff. That's a preseason in the works there.
Yeah, you're right. You're talking about some matchups as you go down to this season. And what really is going to stick with a lot of people before we even get to this matchup between SWAC and MEAC top teams is you going into the Final Four. And this was the matchup that was on paper. You had a matchup that would have featured number 4 Jackson State against Texas Southern University. Jackson State was playing really well. It's funny how at times that Jackson State really played well and other times not so much. And I remember you saying in some ways they were bottom feeders. But not really thinking about that much. The way they closed the season and the confidence they had going into the tournament, that would have been a fascinating matchup, especially when you go back in terms of what took place at Prairie View at home. That was a dog-eat-dog game, and at the end, Prairie View seemed to do what they always do, particularly for the season the last 2 years, is to find a way to get it done, especially at home. But now you're talking about on the road in Birmingham. The game was going to be played at Bartlow Arena over there at UAB, so a different facility for all involved. That would have been a fascinating matchup with that 1 versus 4. Then you're talking about arguably one of the hottest teams, HBCUs in the country. Really, in this time, they were one of the hottest teams in the country, period. You had Southern as a 2 seed featuring against number 3 Texas Southern University, that many said in terms of at least the quarterfinals really played one of their best games of the season. So it would have been fascinating on the men's side to talk about that matchup. And we're going to get into a little more of this before we get into the finals, and then we're going to close out with some baseball top 10 as they actually did their final poll of the season, because there were some baseball games. So we will get that in before we close out for the show today. But with that thought, you talk about the matchups in the MEAC. You had the top 4 teams there in the conference where you're talking about North Carolina Central at number 1, North Carolina A&T at number 2, Norfolk State at number 3, and I believe Bethune-Cookman on the men's side at number 4. It'll be interesting to see in terms of those matchups, especially if those 4 teams. We didn't see the last quarterfinal games in regards to Thursday night. They were not played on the men's side, so you still had those 2 matchups to see who would have actually been the final 4 teams for the MEAC. But I love what you just said, Mike and Charles, both of y'all jumping on this in terms of those matchups. It would be fascinating to open the season next year and see a Prairie View face off against a North Carolina A&T. A Texas Southern face off again, a rematch, if you would, for what took place in the 50s with the NAIA tournament in terms of District 29, and what took place 3 years ago between Texas Southern and North Carolina Central in the Southern. Jackson State facing off against Bethune-Cookman or Morgan State. You're talking about some fascinating type matchups. I would love to see that on the men's side, and there's some interesting matchups on the women's side. But before we do that, let me jump in here and let me see if you have the same kind of thoughts one way or the other in regard to what happened on the women's side. We have 3 teams receiving votes on the women's side as well. You have Hampton Lady Pirates sitting at 18-11, 14-6 if you would. Southern Jaguars sitting at 16-14, 12-5 in the conference, who had 10 and 11 points respectively. You have North Carolina A&T State Aggies in regards to finish out the season at 19-10, 11-5, 19 points. Dropping out of the poll this week as they close up, similar to what you've seen on the men's side. The final rankings had a team dropping out. And that was actually a couple of weeks ago, Hampton Lady Pirates, as they jumped out of the poll this week. And so the top 5 teams, as you see here, were Morgan State Bears sitting at 47 points, previously ranked 4. They jump into the poll. They were not ranked, as Hampton was 4 last week and fall out before the final poll. Their final record was 17-13, 12-4 in terms of what they did in MEAC play. Bringing us to number 4, Texas Southern Tigers, 20-10, 21 team for the Lady Tigers of Texas Southern University women's basketball program. They finished at 14-4, 51 points. as they were ranked 5, they move up one spot in the final poll ranking. At number 3, Norfolk State Spartan Nets, 19-11, 12-4, 72 points. Previous ranked 3, they stay right there. At number 2, Jackson State Lady Tigers, 19-10, 16-2, 4 first place votes, 97 points, ranked number 2. At number 1, you have Bethune-Cookman Lady Wildcats, 23-6, 15-1, 6 first place votes. They finished the season with 109 points, ranked 1. They get it done in terms of being Dr. Cavill's 2019-2020. The Bethune-Cookman Lady Wildcats earned the number 1 rankings in the final poll in week number 11. Let me start with Mike on this one and then go to Charles. Mike, what are your thoughts on the top 5 teams in this final poll for the women's basketball? Obviously, again, regular season, tournament not to be had, so you didn't have anybody had a chance to do the double-double. So you didn't have that final little framework to see what teams did. But what are your thoughts on Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Huddle report for the major division women's basketball poll ranking in week number 11?
Let me tell you, you know I love you. I love you as a coach, but I had a slightly different top 3.
Okay.
I understand the rationale. I had Jackson State number 1. I had Bethune-Cookman number 2. I had Texas Southern number 3, but I did struggle with them versus Norfolk State. Here's why I had Jackson State number 1. The Lady Tigers have an overall record of 8-10. Their conference record is 16-2. You have a 13-game win streak that included a 12-0 start in conference play. That's the best in history. I thought that Bethune tended to be a little bit sporadic. They did play up. I also did statistically their margin of victory compared to Bethune a little bit more. Now, you don't know if that's strength of schedule or strength of conference. I don't know. But for those reasons, I had Jackson State playing better head-to-head. If they were ever to match up, I had Jackson State number 1, Bethune number 2, and I had Texas Southern ending out Norfolk State. And if I'm wrong, then I just need to get a drink and just get over it. You know what,
Mike, tell everybody how you really feel. Go ahead, Charles.
I agree with you, Mike, on that one, and I have to go back and take a look.
So as we see about Charles as he was getting in there, we'll get in here and see if we can get that connection going on a little bit in terms of that. We talk about the Black College 9 and all the poll rankings in terms of what I thought. I also want to get into a little bit of the Black College 9 top 5 poll rankings. So as we do that, want to see in regards to those Black College 9s and continue to push out, but would want to get those final thoughts in terms of what Charles thought in terms of that. Let me see if I could get him back in there a little bit as he was going over his thoughts there in regards to some of those thoughts. Hey Charles, what were your thoughts there?
Yeah, I was saying I think exactly the same reasons that Mike had in terms of why Jackson State I thought should have been number 1, because their RPI was slightly higher than Bethune-Cookman. Like I said, 16-2 in conference play, 13-game win streak, 12-0 in conference play, which was their best start in program history. And when we say program history, this is a history that includes some championships by Sadie McGee in the 70s and in early 80s. So this is a pedigree program, if you will. And for Tamika Reed to come in and do what she did, kudos to her. And I told Ashley Robinson last year at the slam tournament last year, I told him, I think you have a star on your hands in Tamika Reed. That team always shows grit. They show a lot of character out there on the court. They play with a lot of poise. and I think they're going to be one of those teams that you kind of keep an eye out in the future as long as they can keep Coach Tamika Reed.
Yeah, I think you make a great point when you start looking at the RPI and how your strength of schedule should be weighted in regards to where you finish in the poll ranking. I had Bethune-Cookman with the 20-plus wins. The way they dominated the conference, I think that had a lot to do with it. But I think your point that you make in terms of looking at RPI, it can be something that needs to be considered in terms of that process. Let's get in any final thoughts, either one of you, on the top 5 for black men's and women's as we close out the season there.
I think it was an exciting basketball season. I think for all the things that we saw a razor-thin margin of error in the SWAC on the men's side. We saw some great play in the MEAC in terms of their top 3 teams with Central, A&T, and Norfolk State. And then the turnaround for Tennessee State. Don't want to exclude them, but they had a tremendous turnaround season. Unfortunately, they were 9-9 in conference play, which I think hindered. Hello?
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, this is me.
Hey, Mike, what was your final thoughts there on the poll?
Yeah, so we were talking about the women. So
Yeah.
I think I think I made my point that statistically, if you can't compare them to Bethune, Jackson State has played lights out. Their women have played really well over the season. That's why I have them as number 1.
No problem there. I know you wanted to get into a little bit of the Black College Nines poll rankings. As what I know, it was really tough as the season coming in, and obviously that's for all spring sports. But as being a baseball fan as much as you are, in a lot of ways Charles as well, tell us a little bit about your thoughts before we get in these top rankings of what you thought people could expect from this baseball season that ultimately got shut down, and why you were so excited.
I was so excited because you saw another Alabama State team with a deep pitching staff. Yeah. And that typically goes well. They're one of the few teams in the SWAC or the MEAC with a pitching depth that has an average ERA in the low 3s. Everyone else has an ERA or earned run average, team earned run average, that's in the 4.5 5. That's like going to school and one person has an A+ average and everybody else has a C+ average. Their pitching staff was that good. On the other side, Jackson State is an offensive powerhouse. Their team batting average and slugging percentage is unparalleled across the area. So you would love to see, it was kind of like a classic matchup if those two ended up playing, of a good offense versus a good defense. That's why they're number 1 and number 2 in the polls, justifiably. North Carolina A&T, I was a little bit surprised. They don't have the usual firepower, at least at the plate, or in the pitching staff that they typically have had over the last 4 or 5 years. So I would like to see how maybe they would have recovered, maybe with increased pitching depth. So those are 3 or 4 things that stood out with me earlier in the year, at least with the major poll.
No doubt about it. I thought it was interesting with some of those teams and the firepower. Obviously, what were your thoughts in regards to like that big win? You saw the big win from Texas Southern University. Obviously, North Carolina A&T had a big win over ACC team, but nothing quite like what we saw with Texas Southern taking down in one poll number 6 Mississippi State and another poll number 4 in the nation, Mississippi State, on the road getting it done. What were your thoughts in terms of that?
Yeah,
I don't get let Charles jump in there with that, and then we'll come back to you, Mike.
Okay. No, I think that's what I was really looking forward to watching in terms of baseball season. There were certain wins that had turned my head. A&T had one in there, but the Texas Southern win over Mississippi State, that showed a lot to me in terms of what they were able to do. And, once they get into conference play, just watching them match up with Grambling and match up with Southern, which I thought was going to be a tremendous race over there in the SWAC West. And like Mike was saying, in the SWAC East, you have Alabama State and that tremendous pitching staff that they have going against Jackson State with the bats they have. And then Jackson State had a very impressive 4-game sweep of Florida A&M at home. So I think you had some great baseball that was being played, and it was going to be fun watching them this spring in terms of getting into conference play and what they were going to be able to do, especially over there in that SWAC West with Texas Southern, and Grambling all vying for supremacy over there.
Certainly, with that, Charles, I'm going to follow up, and I want to talk a little more about that Jackson State taking on FAMU, why those games are important. The fact that Jackson State got it done was huge for the SWAC. But also, Mike, what were your thoughts, to jump back in there, about Texas Southern getting that big victory over Mississippi State?
I thought it was huge because Mississippi State, they did it on the road. Mississippi State is no slouch in the SEC. And if you look at their season, Texas Southern lost their first 8 games of the season. All of a sudden, they go to Starkville, Mississippi. They beat a good Mississippi State SEC team on the road, 8-4, with good solid pitching and hitting. And all of a sudden, they win their next, I think it was 9 out of 11 games. So completely turned their season around. So I wonder, was it just a slow start? Because Texas Southern typically has a pretty good pitching staff or pitching depth as well. So I was excited to see that, and that was the turnaround, that win at Mississippi State. If they would have gone on and just, done great, wonderful things, you could have pinpointed it to that Mississippi State victory, 8-4, because every other game before that was a loss, and all of a sudden, woohoo! We put a good one on Mississippi State. Now we win our next 9 out of 11.
Certainly, we're getting close to the top of the hour, and we'll be closing out the show officially right at 7 o'clock, so we can move back in to closing things out. But as we head in the closing these thoughts in, let me get into the final Black College Nines. You can go to blackcollegenines.com as they share their final poll of the season in regards to the last games that were played. So people voted on the poll this past weekend. So wanted to get some love in terms of what was taking place in these top 10s. Let's start with the small schools, and we'll get your thoughts on this. It's kind of hard looking at that when you talk about top 10 small schools. Yes, Savannah State, they're in the SIAC now. We just used to seeing them in some points in the major division. Obviously, most people that follow us understand that Savannah State did transfer and move down from the MEAC into the SIAC, moving from Division I at the FCS level back to Division II, back as a member of the SIAC from years in the past. Their final week of baseball, they went 1-0. BCN ranked them. They were not ranked. Current RPI at that time was 291. The record was 7-8. At number 9, you have Albany State out of the SIAC as well. They went 0-1 in their last week of baseball. They were ranked number 8 in the BCN Black College 9 poll that was last done. Their RPI was 135. They ended the season at 8-10. At number 8, you have Benedict College, also out of the SIAC. They did not have any games played that week when they shut down baseball. They were previously ranked in the last BCN poll at number 6. RPI was not indicated, and they were 6-5 in terms of their record. Bringing us to number 7, Miles College. You see a lot of these teams, another SIAC. Boy, the SIAC would have been tough this year and been interesting to follow. Too bad it was lost, but it looks for things to come in the future. Miles was 0-1 in their last week. BCN ranked at number 4. RPI was 333. They had a record of 9-9. Bringing us to number 6, Wiley College, Red River Athletic Conference. Past week were 2-0. Previous week they were not ranked. RPI of 546 at 11-9 in terms of what's going on there. Giving us to the top 5 programs reviewed: Jarvis Christian College, Red River Athletic Conference. as they were 1-0 their last week of baseball for this 2019-20 season, if you would. BCN previous ranked were number 7, RPI of 322. They were 12-12, and number 4, Bluefield State College out of the USCAA. They were 2-1 that last week of baseball. BCN ranking of 3, RPI ranking of 398, 9-6 in terms of the record. And at number 3, Virginia State CIAA, 4-1. Previous BCN ranking as 5, and the RPI was 289, a record of 13-10, bringing us to number 2, Kentucky State, back out of the SIAC as we see them showing their head again, 0-2. BCN ranked number 1 previously. They do drop this week in that final poll. They had an RPI of 411, 12-8, and Lane College out of the SIAC. So you see 6 teams in the SIAC that were ranked in this final poll to give you again the indication of what could have been in the SIAC. Lane was previously ranked 2. They moved up to number 1. They did have that RPI of 421. But give them credit in terms of the record at that time was 10-6. It would have been interesting to see what they would have done for the season. Let me get you into what they call the large division, what we call the major division, and go over that final poll ranking. Florida A&M out of the MEAC 1-1. Previous ranked 9, RPI of 214. They were 5-10. At number 9, North Carolina Central of the MEAC 1-0, RPI. BCN of 10, RPI of 276, 6-11. At number 8, Bethune-Cookman Wildcats of the MEAC, 6-12, 1-1 that past week, RPI of 289. At number 7, Grambling State of the SWAC, 0-1, previous ranked 6, RPI of 226, 6-10. At number 6, you have the Alcorn State Braves. Did not play that last week. RPI ranking previously of 5, RPI of 238. They were 5-7 on the season thus far. Top 5 programs of the large division, major division, Texas Southern of the SWAC, 2-0. 156 RPI, 7-12 on the season. Number 4 was Southern of the SWAC, 0-1 that week. Previous BCN ranking was 4, RPI of 131. They were 6-10. Bringing us to number 3, North Carolina A&T of the MEAC, 0-1, ranked 3, 255 ranking of 7-9. You have Jackson State University in terms of the SWAC, 0-2. Ranked 12, RPI was 122, 9-7 on the season. And you have finally at number 1, Alabama State, 1-1 that week. BCN ranking previously number 1, stay there, 232 as they close out the season. Best record of all HBCUs. Really playing some good baseball. They were at 14-4, getting it done in a lot of ways. We have 2 minutes left there. I'll give you a minute apiece if you would. Start with you, Charles. What are your thoughts on, let's just go with the large school divisions, if you would, top 10 teams in regards to this final poll?
Alabama State vying for the number 1 ranking. Like Mike mentioned earlier, Alabama State with that great pitching, and thus far they were playing probably the best baseball in all of HBCU athletics. 14-4 on the season. Jackson State really opened my eyes with that sweep of Florida A&M, but I think they were a good team too with some good frontline pitching. So I have no problems whatsoever with that ranking 1 and 2. But like I said, it would have been fun. Alabama State, Jackson State, Southern, Texas Southern, I thought would have all been right there in the mix if we had seen a full season.
Last minute for you, Mike?
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better. That Alabama not only the starting lineup, but the bullpen as well. And Jackson State, don't let the smooth taste fool you. While they all have the best team batting average than any school in the SWAC or the MEAC, they are deceptively good on the pitching. Now, the only question I would have had is, would they have had the depth in a tournament? So it would have been a classic battle. And I do agree with them that Texas Southern would have been right there along with Southern University as well. If you look at what they were able to do, at least in the front part of the season. Unfortunately, he couldn't hold out, but it was really exciting to see at least up to this point.
No doubt about it. This is Dr. Will inside the HBCU Sports Lab for Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Hope you enjoyed the show. Try to get you a little bit away from that COVID-19, doing a little different. Look for us to find a way to give you some pictures. Obviously, we did want to thank all those that follow us on Facebook Live. Next time, we'll make sure we get out there and see if we can get some questions from the listeners in terms of what their thoughts were. But I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, as we come to a close. We hope you enjoyed our lecture.
What up, world? It's your boy Rob Calloway, host of the HBCU Report, and right now, you're inside the HBCU Sports Lab with my guy, all hail the Dean of HBCU Sports. You know I named him that. Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, my guy. What's happening, man?
Man, you know I was going to have to find a way to give it to you. Y'all thought y'all could get away with that? Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday, 6 to 7 right here on KCOH 1230 AM, Houston, Texas. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Course lecture dismissed. Take it away.
I love it. I love it. I love my HBCU. I hope my team they won, yeah. I hope my team they won, yeah. I hope my team they won, yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see my team run along. It's a long, I'm quiet as a mouse, but if they won, too tired. I'ma do the job, yeah. Dr. Will, you know what we talking about. Michael Charles, they know what they be talking about. They can touch the analytic data with the real hop if you know them like I know them. They can play you with your team if they want to love you. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention. And he gon' teach the lesson. And he gon' learn the day. He gon' learn the day, how they team they play the play, how they play, boy. He gon' learn the day, how they play the play, how they play, yeah. Do what is in that swamp, get me out, then let me say, just up to Tennessee, stay, tune into the ABC Sports Lab.